My name's Luigi Donorio Dimeo, as if it's not a mouthful. I'm the director of DeFi at Aave Labs. Basically, my role is focused on help shepherding the Avalanche DeFi ecosystem, help making relationships with folks, help shepherding Avalanche Rush that we've announced. So that's enough on me. We have a lot of exciting guests here, and just kind of rather hear them speak than myself.
Awesome. Thanks for joining. Stani, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Hey.
Awesome. Welcome. Well, I'm sure a lot of people here are very familiar, but if you want to give a quick introduction on yourself as we get started.
Yeah, so I'm Stani. I'm the founder of the Aave protocol, and uh, Aave protocol is practically a Web3 interest rate market on chain, meaning that you can get yield on various cryptographic assets. So you can supply different assets into the protocol, and then against your assets you can draw credit as well. So you can borrow other assets or delegate that borrowing power to someone else. And the protocol is cross-chain, and pretty much like now what the other community is looking is to deploy into the Avalanche network. And the protocol itself is run by the community. So every user every second is getting governance power within the protocol by supplying or utilizing assets, and they are making decisions on how the protocol will be built in the future or what kind of parameters could be changed. And I've been building Web3 protocols now for the past 5 years, and Aave itself isn't like a kind of like a DeFi builder. We're more of a Web3 builder, and we're building now decentralized social graph, amongst other interesting things. And I've always loved, finance, tech. So, all the things that's happening now in Web3 is very fascinating, and I really enjoy Avalanche ecosystem because of the kind of like a focus on developers, and also kind of like the team itself that created the network is very focused on developers itself. So it's very cool to be here.
Awesome. Well, welcome, and we're excited to have you. And you touched on a few good points that we'll get into later around community building and the power of a community-led project like that. But why don't we kick it over to Murloc if you want to give a quick intro on yourself as well.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So thanks for having me, first of all. I'm ZeroX Murloc. I am a co-founder at Trader Joe, the decentralized exchange for Avalanche. We're really happy to, to support the community, and our mission is to serve users at the frontiers of DeFi, and we're happily doing that here on Avalanche, the best EVM compatible chain.
Awesome. Welcome, Murloc. Thanks for joining us, and really excited to chat with you today, especially with all the great things happening with the Trader Joe platform right now. So excited to have you. And Jay, you want to give a quick intro on yourself as well?
Yeah. Hey, everyone. Jay here, VP of Marketing at Aave Labs. Similar to Stani's background, was kind of focused on building and growing the DeFi ecosystem around five or so years ago, starting with AirSwap. You guys may know of it in the Ethereum space. Now part of MetaMask swaps, actually. So that was kind of the first plunge into the builder side, and since then joined Aave Labs. We're focusing on making sure that Avalanche is known as far and wide in the world as possible, and also making sure that the protocols like Aave, like Trader Joe, and the rest that are coming down the pipeline have a smooth experience on deploying, and then also making sure that they have product market fit within the ecosystem.
Awesome. Thanks, Jay. Thanks for joining. So we're really excited to jump in here. This is the integrated series. We're talking today about maximizing your DeFi with Avalanche Rush and everything that's coming down the pipeline for that. So we want to kind of get into it first by just asking our special guests about kind of what's the current state of DeFi. It's been evolving a lot over the last 2 years, I'd say. And as we get started here with the Avalanche Rush program, what are you most excited about with how we'll start with you, Stani, with how Aave's coming to Avalanche and building on top of this blockchain. What are you most excited about in bringing your protocol over and getting started with DeFi on Avalanche?
I think, most exciting thing for me is the community, because end of the day, everything boils down to the community. Whatever perspective you're looking into, from the tech perspective, developers, or you look just kind of at what's the enthusiasm and like you know idea flow within a particular project. I think it boils down to the communities, and I think what's interesting to see is that there's a lot of support on what Avalanche has built, which is quite fascinating in from technological perspective. And I've always been in a mindset where I love innovation and I love creating new things and trying new things out. And one of the nicest things about Avalanche is that there's different kinds of uh, components in how the network works in terms of the consensus mechanism. And for me, it's just a interesting to see how a protocol like Aave, which was first deployed in Ethereum and built over past years, Aave used to be ETHLand, and now it's completely community governed, how it expands into other protocols. And I see each and every protocol as a kind of a community, and communities I see as culture. And then being able to enter into the Avalanche ecosystem will just mean that the Aave community itself becomes more, rich in culture and the community. And I think that's the kind of a biggest value here. In terms of what's happened in DeFi for a while, I think I think Aave was itself. I mean, ETHLand was, I think, second DeFi protocol after. And there was Ethernet, and then there was ETHLand and a bunch of other protocols later. And what happened is that DeFi didn't have composability. You just had different kinds of DApp, decentralized applications. They have some sort of a function. And now, if you look at Ethereum, for example, all this decentralized finance are actually talking to each other. It's interoperable, programmable. You can create an application that talks with multiple applications, and applications are like smart contracts. So you have this interesting composability and metaverse and accessibility to this metaverse. And now what we see with this cross-chain functioning is that you expand this composability and culture to a wider spectrum. Of course, you still have, because you have two different chains, there is of course the gap when you move from one place to another. But I will see now we just kind of expand what we have. And for me, this is a very big milestone in the whole DeFi economy. And I think what I would like to see more maybe is that we will see kind of more innovation coming up. So most of the projects are porting into Avalanche because there's a community, there's a lot of support here, the base financial infrastructure is being built. But what will be the fascinating part is actually the second part, where you start to have hackathons and you start to have developers innovating, creating new things. And that's where the very kind of innovative, curious part will happen. That's what I'm looking for, where we are now with Avalanche.
Yeah, I think that's really great. And I think you touched on a great point there about the next wave of DeFi really integrating into culture and having an interesting story and an interesting place for community to be built. And Murloc, I'd like to kick it over to you because I know Trader Joe has built such a great community, especially with, the Trader Joe character and the whole story around it. And I think that's one of the really great, pieces and aspects of your platform as well. So I wanted to kind of ask you a little bit about the community that you've built as a native Avalanche application and how that kind of all got started.
Yeah. So how did it all get started? To be honest, when we first started, Trader Joe was just an internal code name. And, because we didn't know what to call it, but we liked the supermarket. And, after, as we were building it and we were testing different concepts, like in Ethereum, you also have a lot of anime style, cartoons and that kind of culture, I suppose, right? And we thought, well, if Ethereum is 8-bit, CryptoPunks kind of, graphics and things like that, then Avalanche, we'll go 3D, right? We'll go like Minecraft kind of 3D blocks and things like that. And we just, played around with this idea. And I remember asking one of my friends one day, I was like, hey, we're going to build this app right now, it's called Trader Joe. And he tells me very seriously, he's like, I like it. And that's when we thought and that's when we realized hey, this, it's kind of funny, it's kind of silly at the start, but that's also what makes crypto and DeFi engaging, right? Like when it's kind of fun, but it can also be a very magical experience for people. I think what Stanley touched on, like culture and innovation, and I would agree with that 100%, right? Like I think every chain has its own culture, and it's up to us as the builders to kind of define that culture. With Trader Joe, we focused a lot on user experience, and for good reason, right? Because I think that the users that we have here are very different from the ones on, let's say, Ethereum or on Binance Smart Chain, right? And we continue to learn a lot about our users. The first thing that we realized when we launched is that a lot of folks had never tried Ethereum before. And that kind of, shapes the way that they discover DeFi. And so as for what I'm excited for next on, as Avalanche continues to grow is the next set of projects that are sprouting out. Like Stani mentioned, new developers starting new protocols, whether it's forked from something that's we're familiar with, but then adapted to what the users and community are doing in Avalanche. And we're starting to see that now, right? And that's been, I think that's going to be really, really exciting for the coming 1 or 2 months.
And I think one of the things that resonates with both points, actually, what Stani and Murloc has highlighted is exactly kind of their respective strategies towards culture and making sure that the touch points beyond these financial applications or they extend beyond the financial applications. So with Stani and Aave and even the early ETHLend days, I remember some of the digital touch points were focused around kind of this fun environment. I think Aavegotchi is one of the brands that comes out of the Aave ecosystem that kind of exemplifies that fun feel. I think also the fact that lending was something that was relatively new at the time, that was also extending the functionality of the DeFi apps beyond just DEXs and AMMs, and that was also an interesting approach. And then I think now this has permeated into the real world with Stani and the team leading into things like Aave and saying, hey, we have this very interesting space. It's a very global one as well, and there's so many different personalities. How can we celebrate? How can we celebrate beyond just the experience on the application? So that's really cool, and that's obviously done extremely well in the ETH ecosystem, but also has started to permeate throughout the different chains that Aave is exploring, and hopefully that comes into the Avalanche ecosystem as well. As we're a new one, I think there's plenty of opportunities to make those impacts. And then on the Trader Joe side, I was talking to Luigi a lot about Trader Joe for the last few months now, and kind of just the emotions that it evokes and the branding and even the story that you told Murloc about the naming and everything in between. That's when I was like, okay, I think I have a perspective here. I actually wrote a quick Twitter thread. It was mostly from the marketing community function, but it really goes to show that these decentralized applications can innovate beyond just the functional piece of utility. So whether that's swaps, lending, derivatives, it can go beyond that. So now you have apps that have the opportunity to innovate on all different levels. And I think I saw this once you saw a lot of these forks happen. And the forks, I think, from the critics, they say, hey, this is a lazy approach. But what I tend to find is if the forks push beyond or push kind of an angle of innovation or an angle of differentiation, I guess is a better way to frame it, beyond just the application itself. So whether that be brand, community, a gamified experience or something else, I think that's totally a viable approach to just kind of go to market really quickly. So with Trader Joe, it's like you have this hero's journey where you're following the actual Joe character, and he's this friendly guy who goes through and tries to make sure that the farms are tended to and all of these products. But I kind of laugh as I'm saying it, but also it's kind of fun at the end of the day. And one of the points that I was trying to make is that fun and an enjoyable aspect of the experience creates that product stickiness. So in this very nascent stage where we're still trying, all of us, we're still trying to grow out this ecosystem, I think it's a perfectly fine strategy and actually a very strong one at that in terms of growth and bootstrapping a network.
Yeah, I think that's well said on Jay's side. I know Stani and Murloc have had the chance to kind of speak a few times here. And, part of what excites me is really the integration of various cultures. Like Stani's been part of a few different cultures, whether it's Ethereum, Polygon, other cultures that are out there. And, Murloc, if I remember correctly, you've never used Ethereum. So I've only been a part of the Avalanche community. So seeing this mesh and seeing kind of what can be born out of this collaboration of various cultures is what interests me. But it's also, there's some real value to the fact that Aave's contracts have been live for a long time, have been tried and tested in production with a lot of value sitting on them. And bringing that to the Avalanche ecosystem, also opens the doors for new, fresh capital to kind of come in and find its way to all the other exciting projects that are developing on Avalanche. So that's part of what excites me, when it comes to the community front.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you all touched on good points around people entering in from different spaces in this community, but really innovating in new and exciting ways beyond just the kind of the traditional use cases of these different protocols. And so I think as that community building grows, we're going to see a lot more really great community initiatives built. And Stani, I'd like to kind of ask one more follow-up to that with you is kind of what are some of the advantages and some of the things you've seen as your platform shifted to being community run and community developed, and how has that helped your growth path as a platform and as you kind of expand into new chains, into new territories?
Yeah, I think always kind of like when you come up with something new, I would say, and try to go beyond something that anyone else has done before, it's always in one way, it's always kind of like a test for the consensus and appetite of the community and what the community wants to do. But at the end of the day, like all of this kind of like expansions to a new audience, it has had always a positive effect in our kind of like a life span in Aave. And I think what will happen here is that there's already interesting like projects in Avalanche, and like you have a good like financial ecosystem. You have to have swapping. You have to have some sort of like a asset issuance, which happens constantly. Then you have to have the lending and borrowing side. There's multiple pieces of components that you have to have there, and then you can actually innovate on top more. And I think getting lending protocol like Aave into the Avalanche ecosystem will like strengthen the whole community. It just provides the kind of like one of the biggest base layers into the whole Avalanche community, and also why it's good that Aave community is interested in this is because the protocol itself is very resilient. So it had 5 different independent audits, it had formal notification. So it's kind of like built in very resilient fashion, because DeFi is a very like big realm. There are protocols that have been a lot of time has been spent on making them as resilient as they are today. There's a lot of experimentations. And at the end of the day, that's what DeFi is. It's accessibility. It's metaverse. It's a public kind of like a public space for public goods. And getting a protocol like Aave is very important because it also strengthens the security and belief in that particular community. Because if you look at various communities, like the protocol hasn't been deployed every single place, and it has a probable reason because the community looks into what actually could provide value, what strengthens, and how to go towards that direction. So that's the kind of like a vision, I would say.
Awesome. Yeah, I think like you mentioned, the the resiliency is going to be really important as we go into the future here, and how DeFi works on all these platforms, and how all these platforms work together. And I think, bringing Aave over to Avalanche is going to be a key component to the whole Rush program. And as we get into the Avalanche Rush season here, wanted to kind of ask you again, like, kind of what are some of the ways that people were going to be able to really maximize their experience with Aave, and how should they be approaching this platform? Maybe if they're an Avalanche member that's never used it before, or kind of using it for one of the first times. What are some ways that they're going to be able to really take advantage of the platform and approach it that way?
I think in the same way as you approach DeFi or anything new, like new technology anyway, so kind of like understanding like what the protocol does, what are the key components, how it's being used, and also like how it's being governed, what is the whole governance process. And in some cases, kind of like we have this discussion about keeping things very simple and providing good user experience and accessibility. I definitely agree on that, but I think like in decentralization, there's always this kind of like a learning curve that everyone needs to go through, because it's a completely new way of building, infrastructure and building different kinds of protocols. Because usually, like in decentralized finance, you don't build businesses, you build protocols, and you build public goods that are accessible to anyone. And essentially, that's what decentralized finance and decentralization is all about. And this is completely different than what we have in our IRL realm. We tend to focus on building businesses, building brands, and it's a completely contrary on how decentralization DeFi works. So that's the kind of the thing. Like, even if you use the protocol or first timer, there's still always a learning curve to understand what DeFi is all about and what Aave is all about. So that's one of the things I would approach through a learning process. And getting, I think, most out of it is just participating into the community, participating in governance, voting on decisions that are important, helping, the grants DAO, the whole Aave DAO, helping the, communities that are there. All this kind of contribution is very important, because if we don't contribute as a community, we basically lose the power of decentralization, and we're back in the, square one.
Yeah, I think that's a great point by Stani. I know, just in terms of working through this with Stani and the Aave team, who've been first class throughout the whole process, learning about the governance process is one thing that I've been really fascinated by, and actually contributing into that governance process. We've had multiple votes in terms of we've had conversations with the community on the grants call. We've kind of courted the community. We really made an effort to mesh these two communities, because I think at the end of the day, you can deploy protocols on various chains, but unless there's a concerted effort to kind of bring those communities together, then you're not really sure what's going to end up happening. But I will say that decentralized community that they're building there is one that is probably at the top of the list in terms of communities that are active, votes that actually matter. So these are things that it's really, really exciting, and I think it's why a lot of us got into the space. I know I'd like to hear in general, from Murloc, just a little bit on his thoughts in terms of Trader Joe and governance and decentralization in the long term. I know it's a new protocol, but kind of his thoughts on how he wants to approach that as well.
Yeah, so you're right that Trader Joe is very young compared to protocols such as Aave, and I think right now, governance, when we first started, we think, oh yeah, and then we're gonna evolve into a DAO, right? We just slap it onto a roadmap. But given the time that we've been live and the things that we've learned, I look at this as an evolution of it's an iteration of decentralization, and decentralization actually means, I think, a very different thing to us now, given the rapid growth that we've experienced compared to like when we first started. I think that as our protocol has grown and the amount of users, the amount of traffic, the amount of liquidity and everything, funds that we are now handling has grown. Firstly, we're incredibly humbled by the support, but also we now start to shift our priorities in terms of like what we think are like the most important things we need to do, and decentralization is one of them. For example, some of our users sometimes complain that, hey, like why is certain numbers kind of lagging, right? Like, or they tell us, hey, the site's kind of slow. And that's just like a symptom of what it means for a service such as Trader Joe or any other to be able to serve a large number of users at scale. And I think decentralization, like given that we're all in this blockchain crypto kind of business together, like decentralization should be our go-to method of scaling. And so for us, like decentralization really means trying to remove single points of failure, whether it is technical or even operational. And I think governance to some extent is a decentralization of like decision makers and operations, not just in the form of lowering cost to serve and operational costs, but also security and safety, right, of users' funds and so on. I think that's the final evolution. I'm also very curious to see how DAOs and the way that governance will continue to evolve. It is no secret that Trader Joe, like in our early inception days, like we pride ourselves on speed and agility, right? Speed to market, agility to be able to make decisions and so on. But as we've grown, like we also now value like, hey, like sometimes it's prudent for us to slow down a little bit just to make sure things are can be done at scale and safely as well. I think that decentralization is something that we're looking at across all fronts, not firstly technical, like on a platform level, but then secondly, like at an operational level. It is something that we're definitely going to address in the coming like months. I don't think it's a quick process. I think it'll take time and maturity. For our community to mature for us to get there. And I think governance is could be the final step of that. I think that a lot of things that we've seen in Ethereum as some of these protocols also matured, where we have like different kind of voting, whether it's on chain or off chain, snapshot, different kind of voting mechanisms, and they have a lot of like pros and cons, and we've been studying those to some extent. So we also have some ideas about how we think we would do it, but I think it's a lot of things it'll take time for us to evolve because I think code can be improved faster than communities and human interactions and also just trust, right? So for us, decentralization, we're going to do code first, and then operations, and then finally towards governance.
Another quick point on the intersection of community and also some of the decentralized governance conversations that we had, and then finally maximizing your opportunities here. And we might have something from the Avalab side shortly in the coming weeks on how best to facilitate this. But I think conversations amongst the community members is first and foremost very important. One of the things that I think we all were there, actually, maybe. I don't know about Murloc, but at Masari Mainnet, one of the bigger conferences of the last few months, very much focused on institutions, but also focused a lot on the DeFi side of things and the decentralized side of things. And you noticed on the ground, a lot of people were talking about Avalanche Rush. They were also talking about, of course, other projects, probably Aave and Trader Joe as well. And you notice this kind of sense of community already in person. It's like, oh, what are you going to be doing next? Oh, well, Rush has not started yet, but it might be starting next week with Aave deploying or something like that. And you're already having this curiosity peak. So the reason why I think people are doing that is because there's so much going on and there's so much opportunity. People aren't quite sure what the best options are for them. And I think there isn't one cookie cutter answer for everybody, but I think there is something for everyone. It's just a matter of finding that out. And I think that lodges itself into community quite nicely where perhaps talking about the best yield strategies within the Rush program. Maybe if you pick Yield Yak, for example, they're incentivizing their developers because that's what they wanted to focus on. And so perhaps how best to maximize those opportunities, what's the best application strategy, what's the best path forward to make sure that you get selected as kind of I guess like a winner in that part of Rush. So I think it's mostly just idea sharing, and I think that's the beauty of our space, because you can have this collaboration where we all can come together on a Twitter Spaces like this. I'm pretty sure, except for Luigi and me, we're Stani and Murloc, we're all relatively far away from each other, and we can come together and really share awesome ideas. So that's actually one thing I wanted to add, where we're actually trying to plan this out, but maybe there's some way where everyone can come together just around Rush to figure out how best to maximize their opportunities for the campaign.
Yeah, it's a good point. And I'm also trying to figure out when I could take my wife and kids out of the basement. For when Rush starts.
So when is it? Coming soon, right, Luigi?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if Stani has any other ideas, but from my standpoint, we're pretty much all there. It's just a matter of we had the last votes that finalized this week. That was for the Guardian, which probably Stani could talk a little bit more about, which is an interesting concept for the Aave, from the Aave community. And then there's also, the configuration of assets that will be listed for the Aave market on Avalanche. So at this point, I think it's a matter of last configuration, and we're ready to rock and roll. But I'll let Stani also use his own words rather than mine.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like, deployments are very, very slow usually because of the fact that you kind of need to always look all the parameters and double and triple check and everything. But essentially, there is kind of one thing that has been taking a bit of time. There is this a Guardian component in the Aave governance that is set temporarily for a certain period of time, and at a later stage can be by the community set to 0x000 whatnot. But the idea of the Guardian is that they can take the keys of the market until the market is kind of proven to be safe, and then can be transferred to the governance itself. So for example, in the first weeks or months, as the market works as is expected, then the keys can be transferred to the governance. And one of the things that has been an issue and will be quite an issue in many of the projects that are cross chain is how they govern these protocols. And that is something that the Aave Genesis team has been working upon. We deployed recently and shared the code base publicly, and it's open source. Anyone can actually fork it. It's a cross-chain governance module. So it means that you can actually govern the whole Aave protocol within the community, even if it's deployed on separate networks. So for example, if there is an asset configuration is to be changed in the Avalanche market, the voting can happen in Ethereum and vice versa, for example, in the future. So this kind of cross-chain governance actually helps to ensure that you have cross-chain protocols that are governed in a decentralized fashion, and that's the part that we have been building. And now that it's ready and the Guardians are coming together, it means that the next step is that you can actually deploy the market. So it's quite soon, which is quite nice. I know everyone is very eager about this, and and I kind of think that once the second step essentially will be how we can improve that market, what kind of new assets could be added, and what kind of things could be done to create a better market. So that's something I would say that where the Avalanche community can participate in the future.
Yeah, that's a great point, and that's honestly what I'm excited about too, right? And going through this process with the community, I'm very excited for the Avalanche community in general to kind of venge out and learn more about Aave governance, Aave decentralization, how new assets can be listed, getting buy-in for those assets to be listed, understanding the collateralization ratios, understanding, how the protocol works in terms of sort of pooling together some of the risks and all of that combined. And, that's just a great way for a lot of users in DeFi to really have deep understanding of how some of these protocols work. And I think if you take a look at the Aave governance forums, you'll see some really interesting posts there and, some fascinating things like, just taking an aside here, Stani, I don't know if you wanted to talk a little bit about Aave Arc and kind of what you guys are working on that side. I know there were some tweets out this morning, but in general, if you had any comments on what you guys are trying to achieve on that and how, what excites you about that as well.
Yeah, in terms of the Aave Arc, I think kind of it's like a separate protocol. So it's more of like a protocol for institutional markets. So there has been this demand where some of the institutions can't at the moment participate in decentralized finance. For example, they have higher risk appetite and they're waiting for clarity or whatnot. And what it means that actually the Aave Arc market helps them to participate in a kind of like a permissioned market where there's whitelisters, and Fireblocks is one of the whitelisters. So what it means is that these whitelisters have certain kinds of rules that you can participate into this market. And the whitelisted then can whitelist depositors, borrowers, liquidators, and create kind of like a segregated liquidity pool, essentially. Essentially, it's a separate protocol that allows to create a private pool with configurations that maybe you want to have different kinds of like asset allocation there, or just you want to know whoever participates in that market. It's a very fascinating project initiated by Fireblocks and Galaxy Digital. And I think that's something that is happening quite soon. So excited to see how it will progress.
Awesome. That's really exciting, and to hear about kind of the new developments. And I know both of these projects have a lot of things coming up, and we're excited even beyond Avalanche Rush to see what both of these platforms are going to bring to the table. Murloc, I wanted to kind of ask you how, as we get into the Avalanche Rush program, I know there's going to be a lot of new users coming over from different ecosystems, from using these protocols on the Ethereum network, and wanted to kind of introduce these new community members to Trader Joe and how that's actually going to complement what Aave is bringing, what Aave is doing, and wanted to kind of see how you felt about how Trader Joe can complement Aave and work together kind of to maximize DeFi on Avalanche.
Sure. So obviously, like when people I think of it like traveling, right? Like you go to a new country, and you want to eat local, you want to check out like the local scenes and so on, right? And but when you fly, maybe you will fly with a carrier that you feel safe with. You will stick to your bank and credit card and so on. And I think that this is the same kind of situation, right? Most of our users today, a lot of them, they're crossing over from Ethereum. But because of all this liquidity coming from Ethereum as well, we also have a lot of other users coming from different chains and ecosystems. And so when they arrive here, in Avalanche, they will definitely still, find a brand that they trust and are familiar with. And Aave is such kind of brand, right? Like maybe they have funds in Ethereum, maybe they have funds in Polygon, and this is something that they feel comfortable with. Now, they may not want to sell, let's say, their Bitcoin or Ethereum, what have you. I don't know, tax reasons maybe. And they don't want to sell it, but they want to go and check out the local scenes. And so one thing that we've noticed that people do when they cross the bridge is they deposit their collateral into Benchy, and I think they'll do the same for Aave. And then they'll take out like some USD collateral and then go and try out some of these newer protocols here on Avalanche, which includes Trader Joe, but also maybe just go through Joe to swap into coins of some of the other smaller projects. Maybe they'll buy like a meme token to have fun with. Maybe they'll ape into some other yield farms. And I think this is the same kind of pattern, right, for people that are going to be crossing bridges, checking out new protocols and new chains. But they're still going to have this need of like getting collateralizing tokens in a place that they trust, right? Like they're going to stick to the bank that they trust. And I think that's what people are doing with Benchy right now. Like Benchy's been backed with a lot of investors, and they've definitely put in a lot of effort around like security and those aspects. And I think Aave will also bring even more visibility for Avalanche, for people to know that like hey, they when they come to Avalanche, there is Aave, that this is a brand that they may be familiar with, that they can trust. They can then take out some more USD collateral to then, and this is just overall it will increase the liquidity into the ecosystem.
Yeah, it's really exciting, and I think there's a lot to be done there. And I love the analogy. I think you really kind of hit it spot on in terms of what this means kind of for everybody that's bridging over and being able to take advantage of these platforms. So really excited about kind of how these two communities are going to kind of come together and work together. So wanted to kind of go beyond Avalanche Rush and talk about kind of the future of DeFi and crypto, and as we've all been in the space and seeing what's being developed across the board. We'd love to kind of hear everyone's thoughts on what they're excited about that's next in DeFi, and what's they're excited about that's next in crypto, and we'll kind of touch on everybody. And so, Jay, why don't we start with you? What are you excited about coming up on DeFi and Avalanche, but also in the larger space?
I think DeFi and Avalanche, of course, the growth of both protocols that are represented here, I think that goes without saying. But beyond that, it's really just what's coming next. What is all of this activity going to bring on? Yesterday, I was checking some of the on-chain stats. Avalanche has doubled the active wallet count from August to September. I think it's about 190K now, and that's before Rush actually, or a lot of Rush has actually started, which is a reasonably strong signal of potentially a stronger growth trajectory for active wallets. So super excited about that. And then also the general sentiment I always share with Avalanche versus other smart contract platforms is what can be enabled by the fact that Avalanche can achieve sub-second finality while maintaining 1,000 validator nodes at its current count, and then also being cost effective when it comes to transaction fees. What's something that can actually be unlocked with those value props? So one example I tend to give, just that's top of mind, is Sablier. Sablier is a project or protocol that allows for real-time payments on chain. Real-time payments on chain, of course, won't work if you have high gas fees, because then your entire balance gets eaten away from those transaction fees. So something like that as a use case, I think those are the things that I'm excited to see, and I think those are the things that will likely come onto Avalanche within the next few months or quarters, and that's to me the most exciting part of what's next.
So awesome. Luigi, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, for Avalanche Rush as a program as a whole, I'd say that this is a program that's built for long-term growth of the Avalanche ecosystem. It's designed to really incentivize innovation and native deployments. I know what you're seeing initially are not necessarily native deployments, but most of what you will see for Avalanche Rush will be to incentivize native growth on the Avalanche ecosystem. We were very focused on building, and Avalanche is very focused on building a robust developer community. At the end of the day, that's what matters most. Stani talked about culture. A lot of culture emulates from that, but it also emulates from the users. And so having those two kind of coagulate together is somewhat where I think Avalanche Rush can be part of the linchpin that ignites all that. Aside from that, what I'm really excited about is not only in DeFi, but other things as well. Like I know Stani, has been mentioning a lot about the social graph. That's something that's very near and dear to my heart, because I do feel as though Web3 has a long way to go outside of DeFi. a lot of the things that we were talking about and building in 2017, whether it was like decentralized social networks, decentralized shared economies like Airbnbs and Ubers, these are all things that are actually much more practical today. Given the infrastructure that's being built with DeFi and the primitives available, and also the fact that we have a great bootstrapping mechanism in liquidity mining incentives. And so, like, I'm super fascinated to see what happens in Web3 in the next coming months and years.
Yeah, so much to look forward to, so much going on, especially with Avalanche Rush, but even outside of that. So Stani, how about you? What are some things you're excited about even beyond Rush that's just kind of happening in crypto, happening in DeFi that you're kind of paying attention to?
Well, definitely, I think like what's interesting is this kind of like a creator economy and creator community finding Web3 and crypto in general. So that's something that I'm very, very excited about, because in one way, it onboards more people into the ecosystem, not just kind of like who are interested in finance or just in crypto in general, but also kind of like this NFT community is very cool. And I'm very like actually excited how the NFT community has been evolving so quickly and with high quality projects in the Avalanche as well, with the Avalanche Apes and also like the reindeers. And now there's a project called like Avax Blobs at the moment. Like there's like a lot of cool stuff going on in NFT space. So I'm very excited about that. And of course, like this is like the current state. There's just so much things to be built on Web3. So like there's just like we're so early, and I think like as more people come into the space, we'll see more and more innovation.
Yep, we are definitely early, and there's going to be quick innovations happening.
Love the apes. Love the apes.
Love the apes. Are you gonna get yourself a blob?
Yeah, I may or may
Yes,
not.
probably.
Definitely have a blob.
Yes, probably.
Yes,
definitely gonna have a blob.
for sure.
I have a deer. I have an ape. Now I need a blob.
All right, definitely, we got to get those. All right, Murloc. Lastly, over to you, and then we'll take some fan questions. But what are you most excited about, looking forward to, kind of in DeFi and the crypto space?
Yeah, and this is about the bridge. I think that the bridge is a really the Avalanche bridge has been a really interesting experiment for me. In this whole like multi-chain kind of narrative, sometimes people also ask us, "Oh, so are you guys considering about going to other chains, or when will you do that, and so on?" And to me, like I've always thought, like, hey, that question doesn't make any sense. Like, why would I go to other chains? I want people to come to me. And the success of the Avalanche bridge, and the world class user experience that it brings for people, crossing over from Ethereum. Like I think that's really been a game changer for me. I look forward to the bridge extending to other ecosystems, right? So they can bring even more people to Avalanche, and for them to discover Trader Joe. So that on the DeFi side, like I think that's something that I look forward to. If as Avalanche Rush is successful and we grow the ecosystem, like I would look forward to introducing Avalanche and Trader Joe to even more users.
Awesome. Yes, definitely a lot to look forward to, and thanks for all the great insight. So we're gonna spend some time here taking a couple questions from the audience. So if you'd like to ask a question, just request to be a speaker, and I'll let you in, and we'll do quick questions, and we'll kind of focus on DeFi and the Avalanche ecosystem, and we'll have our guests answer some questions. So feel free to request to be a speaker, and we'll let a few people in. All right. DevOps dude, you're up.
Hi, I have a question on just getting started with Avalanche. What are the best ways to get into the ecosystem?
I think some resources that might be helpful. There's a total value locked kind of DeFi I guess like dashboard called Marker, markr.io. That's a reasonable reference. Also, DeFi Llama is a multi-chain version of that. Avalanche is also on there. So you can kind of figure out what activity exists on some of the top dApps. That's a good option. The other one I would say is if you have assets on Ethereum, the bridge that Murloc was referencing, bridge.avax.network, all the tutorials are there as well. And then the last point is the ecosystem page. This is where you hop in from the bridge or just directly from the URL, and you can see what dApps are available for you to use, and then which ones also qualify within the Rush incentive program.
Yeah, and just one thing I'd add to that real quick is just in terms of the bridge, the user experience is quite nice. If you want to try to bridge over a small amount of assets or a small amount of ETH or something like that, the UX also provides a small, if it's above $75 of a bridge transaction, you'll get a small amount of Vox airdropped over to you. So you don't have to worry about not having a Vox for gas for your first transaction. That's completely taken care of with the way the UX and the bridge is designed. So that solved a lot of issues, but it's also probably the best way to get started from my standpoint.
Yeah, definitely. There's lots of resources out there. Thank you. That was a great question. So let's go to the next person real quick. Let's see if this works up. Connecting here. All right, 2Ps, you're up.
Greetings. How's everybody?
Doing well. Thanks for jumping on.
Yes. So my question was for DeFi. I'm new to DeFi, and I've been listening to you guys. So what do you guys suggest for me to get what's like the minimum amount to see like some results in Trader Joe?
I guess that question's for me.
I guess so. Yeah. I didn't want to answer for you.
So obviously, firstly, not financial advice, and secondly, I would just start with a small amount, just to see what happens. Right. The great thing about Avalanche is that the cost of transactions are very low and it's very fast, and so you could start with like $100 US, $50 US. Just start with a small amount. Just pick a coin that you like, and try out like a yield farm. And the moment you get in there, you can just wait a few seconds, and then you'll start seeing that hey, there's something that you can click on and harvest right away. And I think just experiencing that for the first time is really great for a lot of new users. I would just get comfortable with it before making larger decisions. And obviously, other great guys to follow on Twitter, for tips and what are the projects that they're checking out. There's lots of people in the community, and everybody's very open to giving suggestions and answering questions.
Cool, great question. Thanks, Murloc. We'll take a few more here, so let's try this out. We're gonna invite Jen on to see if this connects. Jen, you are on mute, but you go ahead.
Hi, thank you so much. Unless I'm unaware of it, I don't believe there's a way to bridge strictly mobile wise. I think that it's only desktop at the moment. Unless I'm mistaken, you can point me in the right direction. Or is there a plan to make that possible in the future?
I don't know if there's a plan written down, and you're not wrong. I don't think there is a mobile version of the bridge, but I can definitely check with the product team. I don't see why that wouldn't be a natural next step.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
thanks, Jen.
Great question. All right, let's go to the next one on Andreas. Let's see if this goes through. It's connecting here. Go ahead, Andreas. You're on mute. All right, Andreas, you there? You can come off mute and ask a question.
Is that the Space Maker?
Can you hear me?
Yep. Can hear you now.
Oh, great. Yeah. I have a more technical question. I find the specs you just mentioned earlier in the talk that Avalanche is so fast very interesting. It's about state management and data availability. Yeah, I'd be very curious where I can read more on that. I come from the DeFi side. I've been in it for quite a while, and I'm just listening to this because Stani is in the chat, and so I would like to explore it a bit. Where can I read more technical things about Avalanche? Probably on the website somewhere. Maybe you can elaborate on the state management and data availability on Avalanche.
Yeah, so I think some of the resources, I don't know if I can personally elaborate on the state management, though it is something I know from a high level. But what could work well for resourcing, two options. One is YouTube. There are plenty of technical conversations that I think address a lot of your questions, I believe, including some of the state management discussions. So that's the Avalanche YouTube / Avalanche AVAX. Another option would be the developer docs. So docs.avax.network. There's a ton of material there. Most of that's geared towards technical people and developers. And then I guess there's a third. The last one is Discord, chat.avax.network. That's where all of the Avalabs devs are available to discuss some of these questions. So maybe that's where the question can be directed. And then broadly speaking, if there is demand or it's still kind of a gap from a content perspective on addressing these questions, maybe it's worthwhile to spin up another conversation, Spaces or something like that, involving the platform team as well as the other engineers. But yeah, good question.
Yeah, great question. Thanks, Jay. All right, we're going to take one more from someone that requested early on, Crypto Knight. Let's see if you can connect. We'll take this last question and then we'll wrap things up. Go ahead. Go ahead. We can't hear you. Can you try your audio one more time? All right, looks like it's not working. Why don't we jump over to one more? Let's see here. Gavin Lowe. Let's see if yours can connect.
Having a liquid Aava, what would the requirements of it to be to work together with Aava?
So I think the first question was on liquid staking on Avalanche. I know in terms of that, there are many projects that are actually actively working on attacking that problem. It would obviously open up a huge source of liquidity, in terms of the network. So that's definitely something that's on the focus for a lot of projects. It's going to be more the one that I think are going to attack that going forward. So I didn't quite get the question for Stani, but he might have.
Yeah, I couldn't hear it either. Exactly what was that?
Oh yeah, so I think in terms of working with for example, liquid Aava, like what would the requirements be like in order to work together with a like lending and borrowing platform like you guys? Yeah, I guess definitely one of it would be something like the liquidity. So and in terms of the TVL, so I guess maybe is there any kind of figures out there which is that you guys are actually comfortable with?
Well, the protocol itself, essentially it's decentralized. The community can decide and vote upon assets, and it's up to the community then to actually list those assets into the Avalanche market. But there is the Aave risk framework. If you go to the docs, it's very comprehensive. That has been built with the community, where you actually see all this kind of different risk parameters of different assets. So that gives a lot of perspective of what kind of asset could be used as a collateral.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks. Great question. And thanks to everybody for jumping in with the community questions. We'll make sure we'll have more of these discussions and get all of your questions and an opportunity to learn more about Avalanche Rush. But wanted to give an opportunity to really thank our special guests here, Stani and Murloc. Stani, I don't know if there's any final thoughts you want to give to the community here to wrap things up.
No, I would say just kind of like learning and understanding about decentralization, these protocols, how they work, and are governed and participation. That's like the kind of like suggestion I would say. I'm very excited how innovation is thriving now in Web3, and I think this is just the starting point. So excited to see like so many people here and interested in listening what we had said, and I'd like to thank also the Avalanche community and the team to actually have me here today. So very much appreciated.
Yeah, thank you, Stani.
Yeah, really appreciate you being here with us. I'm really excited to see the next phase of growth for Aave. So yeah, thanks again for joining us. And Murloc, any final words from you?
Yes, buy the dip.
Not financial advice.
Yeah, you forgot that.
Yeah. With the disclaimer, he's got the final words in. Jay, Luigi, anything from you guys?
Yeah, just going to keep my wife and kids in the basement for a minute. But until then, I will say that, we are, at Avalanche, we are building for the long term here. We are very focused on, what we believe that this layer one technology can bring, not only, with the beginning of Avalanche Rush, but longer term. I think Web3 holds a lot of opportunities, and I think Avalanche is going to be a premier layer one chain that can actually transport a lot of that value. So super excited, and look forward to aping with everybody here.
From my end, just quickly, DMs are open. If anyone wants to discuss anything that we talked about, happy to chat about that. I think it's interesting to always connect with people who are listening just beyond these types of events too. So thanks for having me.
Awesome. Yes, thank you everybody for joining. Reach out to us across all of our different community channels and networks. Be happy to discuss more about anything we talked about today around maximizing DeFi. Avalanche Rush is coming, so everyone stay tuned. And thank you again for joining us, and for the community for building with us and taking us along the journey. And thank you one last time to Murloc and Stani. So hope everyone has a great rest of your day, and stay tuned for more spaces.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Thanks, guys. Cheers.